There's a kind of pain most people don't talk about. It's not a broken heart from a relationship. It's not grief after losing someone. It's not even the ache of failure or disappointment. It's the pain of asking God something real and getting no answer at all. You pray, you cry, you lay awake at night whispering, "Please, say something." And the silence is louder than any scream. If you've ever begged God for a sign, for clarity, for comfort, and all you got was silence that made your bones feel hollow. If you've ever stared at your ceiling, wondering if heaven had a gate closed just for you, you're not alone. This is for you, because no one warns you that the walk with God sometimes feels like walking through fog, with no voice, no light, just your heartbeat and your hope. And maybe that hope is fading. Maybe you're tired of being the strong one, tired of waiting, tired of showing up to church, to life, to prayers, when all you feel is the emptiness echoing back at you. But listen to me. God's silence is not a rejection. It's not punishment. It's not abandonment. It's something deeper, something sacred. If this speaks to your heart, now stay. You're not alone. Let's walk through this together. Let's find out what His silence is really saying. You know that moment when you wake up and for a few seconds you forget the weight on your chest, but then it comes crashing back, the anxiety, the questions, the silence, and your first thought is, "God, are you even with me today?" It's not that you stop believing. You still love Him. You still want Him, but you feel like you're walking through a hallway where every door is locked and no one is answering. You've done everything they told you to do. You prayed the right prayers. You listened to worship songs when your heart was breaking. You kept showing up even when you were breaking inside. You even smiled when people asked how you were doing. Because what were you going to say? That I'm drowning even though I believe in God? That I feel forgotten even when I'm doing all the right things? There's a loneliness that comes with spiritual silence. The kind of loneliness that doesn't show up on your face, but eats away at your soul. People don't see it. They see you functioning, going to work, raising your kids, being polite, quoting scripture. But deep down, you're wondering, did I do something wrong? Why can't I feel Him anymore? Why does it seem like God speaks to everyone else, but not to me? And the worst part, you feel guilty for even thinking like that. You beat yourself up for feeling distant, like somehow your silence is your fault. But let me say something to your soul. You are not crazy. You are not faithless. You are not alone. This space you're in, this quiet place where your heart keeps knocking, it's not the end. It's a waiting room. And you're not abandoned here. You're being held, even if you can't feel the arms. There are others like you, people who smile in public but weep in prayer, people who stay quiet, not because they don't care, but because they're too tired to explain the storm inside. If that's you, I see you. And more importantly, He sees you. There's a moment in the silence where you start to question everything, not just your prayers, but your faith, your worth, your place in God's story. You wonder, is this just me talking to the ceiling every night? Maybe I made all this up. Maybe God speaks to people with cleaner hearts, stronger minds, better lives. You replay every decision you made, every sin you confessed, every fast, every promise, every late-night whisper where you asked Him to just show up. And when He doesn't, something inside you breaks, not in rebellion but in confusion, because how do you keep worshiping when the God you're singing to feels a million miles away? How do you open your Bible when the words don't comfort like they used to? How do you bow your head when you're not even sure anyone's listening? It's not bitterness, it's not pride, it's heartbreak. You didn't come looking for a miracle. You came looking for presence, for peace, for the sound of your Father's voice in a world that's gotten too loud and too empty. And here's the part no one wants to say out loud. Sometimes you resent Him for being quiet, not because you don't believe He's good, but because you know He's good. And yet He stays silent while you're unraveling. You see Him rescue others, heal others, answer others, and you wonder, what's wrong with me? That question becomes a shadow. It follows you into every prayer, every moment of worship, every lonely night. You don't stop loving God, but you start feeling like He's no longer reachable, like you're on the outside of something sacred, knocking, waiting, hoping someone opens the door. This isn't just doubt, it's a spiritual ache, a yearning that runs deeper than words, a wrestling in your soul that doesn't have language, just tears and silence. But even here, in this raw, unfiltered place, you're still His, even in your questioning, even in your wondering, even when your faith is flickering like a candle in the wind. He hasn't turned away. And what you feel as distance might just be a different kind of nearness. And then it happens. Not a voice, not a miracle, not fire from the sky, just a moment. So small, so quiet, you almost miss it. Maybe it's a verse you hadn't thought about in years. Maybe it's a song playing in a random store. Maybe it's a sentence in a book, or a child's laugh, or a breeze on a day you thought would crush you. Something soft, but it moves something in you. And in that moment, for just a second, the silence doesn't feel so heavy. You remember. Not everything, not why the pain came, not how long the valley will last, but you remember that you felt this before, and somehow you're still standing. You remember that time years ago when you thought your world had ended, and He carried you through. You remember the time you got the strength to forgive when you swore you never would, the moment you held peace in your hands and didn't know how it got there. You remember the whisper, not in your ears but in your spirit, that said, "I am here." And maybe it wasn't loud, but it was real. And maybe it didn't fix everything, but it reminded you that you were never alone. Because sometimes what we call silence is just God speaking in ways we weren't listening for. Not in thunder, but in stillness, not in answers, but in presence and in the remembering. There is healing. You don't suddenly get all the clarity. You don't suddenly feel like worshiping with fire in your chest. But you stop spiraling, you stop drowning. Because you remember that faith isn't about always hearing, it's about continuing, even when it's quiet. And something shifts, not around you, but inside you, a breath, a pause, a single second where the panic fades and all that's left is a flicker of trust. Frail, but alive, and sometimes that's enough. Healing rarely feels like healing when it starts. It doesn't come with fireworks, it doesn't feel like victory. It feels like learning to breathe again after you forgot how. It feels like waking up and not crying right away. It feels like looking at the same unanswered prayers, but with a little less anger. It's quiet, it's fragile, it's real. And that's where God works best. In the subtle, in the ordinary, in the shadows where no one else sees. But He does. You start noticing that somehow you made it through the day without falling apart. That somehow the panic that used to grip your chest now whispers instead of screams. You don't have all the answers, but the questions don't crush you like they used to. That's the thing about spiritual rebuilding. You never really know it's happening until you look back and realize you didn't die in the silence. You grew in it. Not because you forced yourself to be strong, but because God was strengthening you quietly. While you were doubting, He was deepening your roots. While you were questioning, He was softening your heart. While you were silent, He was still speaking, through people, through moments, through grace you didn't even recognize at the time. You expected thunder. He gave you water. You wanted answers. He gave you endurance, and slowly, your faith becomes less about getting what you want and more about trusting who He is. Not the God of quick fixes, but the God who sits with you in the dark, who doesn't rush you, who doesn't shame you for doubting. The God who says, "Even here, I am with you." And you realize maybe that was the answer all along. Not a fix, but a presence. And from that presence, something begins to grow again. Hope, not loud, not perfect, but present. And hope is the soil where trust takes root. And somewhere along the way, you begin to understand, not everything, Not why the silence lasted so long, not why the breakthrough took its time, but you see it now, what the silence did to you. It didn't destroy you, it refined you. It burned away the surface-level faith, the formulas, the noise. It made you face yourself, your doubts, your fears, your need for control. And in that raw, silent space, you met a version of God the church never quite described. Not the one in stained glass, not the one in slogans or sermons, but the God who waits with you in the wilderness, the God who loves you. Even when you have nothing left to offer, you realize the silence wasn't absence, it was invitation. An invitation to go deeper, to trust when you couldn't trace, to stay when you wanted to walk away, to believe when believing hurt. You remember that seed doesn't grow in sunlight alone. It needs the dark. That some prayers are answered not with miracles, but with maturity. And that maybe what felt like God withholding was actually God preparing. Preparing you to carry peace that can't be shaken. Preparing you to love without needing applause. Preparing you to walk by faith, not by sight, not by feelings, but by something rooted, something eternal, because real faith isn't shiny, it's scarred. It's been through the fire and didn't fake a smile. It cried, it wrestled, it doubted, and it stayed. And now you're different. Not because everything is fixed, but because you found a kind of strength that doesn't need fixing to keep going. You've become someone who doesn't need noise to know God is near. Someone who can sit in the silence and say, I don't hear him right now, but I know he's here. And that knowing, that quiet, trembling, unshakable knowing, is where real peace begins. So here you are, not fully healed, not without questions, not walking on water, but walking, one step, then another, not because you feel strong, but because something inside you refuses to give up. And maybe that something is God. Not the dramatic God who parts seas in front of you, but the tender God who walks beside you quietly when no one's looking. The God who doesn't explain everything but never leaves. The God who lets you wrestle but still calls you his. You've made it through nights that felt unbearable. You've prayed prayers with no words left. You've sat in the dark and still whispered his name. That's not weakness, that's worship. And now, even if nothing changes, you've changed. You don't need every answer to rest. You don't need every miracle to believe, because peace has found a home in you. Not because you understand God, but because you trust him anyway. And if today you're still in the silence, if the waiting room hasn't opened yet, if the pain is still fresh, stay. Not because it's easy, but because this is where transformation happens. This is where roots go deep. In the silence, in the stillness, in the surrender. So tonight, when the world gets quiet again, when no one sees you crying, when the ache returns and the prayers feel dry, just whisper this: God, I'm still here, and I believe you are too. If this helped you breathe again, come back tomorrow. We walk together. You don't have to heal all at once. You just have to keep showing up. And every time you do, grace meets you in the dark.